Okay, we are live, Sean.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Build a Better Advisory Business. I'm Sean Bailey, editor in chief at Horse's Mouth, and I'm here with Bill Cates, really one of the giants in the world of referrals. When I got into this business in 1999, Bill Cates was the referral man. He was the author of Unlimited Referrals, something that every financial advisor needed to read back then, and frankly, could probably benefit by reading it again now if it was available, right, Bill?
Yeah, I think eBay for a few dollars.
A few $100s, I think,
Yeah, I wish.
because we know what referrals are really worth. So,
True.
Bill, thanks for being on.
Yeah, you
And
bet.
in all seriousness, you've made a major contributor in our industry on this topic, and I'm really happy to have you here to talk about it.
Thank you.
And one of the things I want to start off with is like, you do have the perspective of history. So, and this industry, I mean, it's changed quite a lot from the, 80s and 90s to the current. So, why don't you just tell us a little bit about how you got involved with this topic of referrals and what it was like when you were first entering the business, and we'll then come forward to today and get into, useful tactics and tips and things advisors can keep in mind to keep the referrals coming.
Yeah, sure. I mean, when I first got started in this business and teaching advisors how to get more referrals, it was mostly about the asking, how to do it in a way that wasn't kind of the old methodology, right? The old methodology is, let me tell you how I get paid. I get paid in two ways, is about really, money in your pocket when you should be talking about the client's money. Uh, there are still some people who use that today and uh, swear that it works. And I tell them, look, if it's legal, ethical, moral, and it helps people and it works, fine. I mean, I'm not going to tell people to stop. But what I evolved into was a more client-centered way to do this, about making about the value that you bring. But what I learned actually fairly quickly is that a lot of folks that I was teaching how to do this, they weren't referable or as referable as they needed to be in the first place. So we started working on client engagement and how to create those engaged relationships so that you could get some referrals without asking. And then if you did ask, you had people more receptive. And then, of course, the do not call regulations come in and all the various ways that it made it more difficult to reach people. And so we have started focusing much more on the word introductions. And actually, I recommend to advisors now, whether you're with a client, a prospect, a center of influence, anyone has the ability to connect you, you want to use the word introductions. I mean, we may use the word referrals here today,
Right.
but with those folks, because that's what you want. You need to get connected,
Right.
right? And that evolved a little bit more because I was interviewing some folks for a speech. It's one of those in-person speeches before COVID, and we all remember some of those. And so I was interviewing these guys, and they were pretty successful. And I said, so when you get a referral, when you get an introduction, what do you say to the prospect? And I learned that their value propositions were very weak. They just weren't strong. And what I learned from that is that power of the borrowed trust that comes from a referral or an introduction will actually make up for a weaker way, a less effective way to talk about your value. So sometimes you can still go all the way and win the new client, even though how you talk about your value isn't particularly strong. But that experience made me write my last book, Radical Relevance, which is how do we talk about our value in a way that's relevant and compelling. That's kind of the next step in the process, right? You got to get introduced, and then you got to win the new business. So that's how I've seen it evolve a little bit over the years.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a good point about the value proposition, which struck me a few years back. And advisors really hadn't been thinking about their value proposition for
Right,
whatever reason.
right.
And we surveyed a few hundred advisors, maybe 500, I think. And as I recall, hardly like 30% had no value proposition, and almost 60% described their value proposition as weak or okay. So, yeah, you have any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, and I would say they all have a value proposition. It's the weak part is how they're communicating it, right? And
Right.
so I'll give you one very specific example is the what makes you different aspect of how you communicate your value. So there are a lot of folks in this business, they think that's the end all be all, that you have to communicate what makes you different than other advisors out there. And I would say that can be an important part, but it isn't the end all be all. I mean, there's a lot of folks out there doing very well. I coach some of them, I interview some of them, and they don't have a particularly strong way to talk about what makes them different. So be careful about what the gurus that I guess I could fit in
Mhm.
that arena. Uh, what the prospect and clients want is they want to know the answer to the question, are you right for me? Right? That's ultimately what they want. So what makes you different can be a player in that. In my book Radical Relevance, I have the 17 rules of radical relevance, and one of them is only differences that matter. So meaning only that difference of if it matters to the prospect, then it's a differentiation. And since COVID hit, I've been doing more coaching than I had typically done because I've got more time. And let me tell you, the fact that you provide great service, the fact that you care about your clients, the fact that you give customized recommendations is not a differentiator because everyone is saying that. And I'm not saying you don't talk about those things. Those things are important, but don't think of them as a differentiator because they, in most cases, aren't. Now, the fact that you target a specific market, you have an expertise in a certain area, you have a unique process for doing something, well, that can definitely be something that makes you different as long as you can translate it to the benefit to the prospect. When I work with advisors on their value proposition, I've learned that most advisors haven't been taught the difference between classic features and benefits.
Mhm.
Most advisors talk in terms of the features, and that's good. That's part of the equation, but they don't pull it all the way to the benefit, and they expect the prospect or the client to
There
understand
you
what the
go.
benefit is, and they may not. And so sometimes we lose business because we haven't made that translation. I mean, I could talk about value proposition forever, but that's certainly one of the elements that I've seen a lot.
Right. Yeah. So, well, why don't you talk a little bit about, what is working today regarding referrals?
Sure. Well, a few things. There are some people out there that'll tell you, don't ask for referrals, don't ask for introductions. Your clients aren't thinking about you and they don't care about that. They just care about themselves, yada, yada. Well, all I have to say is don't let that person's fear and uncomfortableness and lack of knowing how to do it affect your business because you can ask. Now, a lot of people are afraid to ask. They don't want to push. They don't want to look needy, all that kind of stuff. And so that's one of the things that I work with folks is how to ask in a way that isn't pushy, that isn't needy, that isn't going to hurt a relationship. And we can dive into that in a minute if you want. But I've also, I have a new podcast. It's called Top Advisor Podcast. TopAdvisorPodcast.com is the address. And recently I've interviewed a few folks who've done quite well getting referrals, introductions without asking. In fact, it's opened my eyes to some things. I've always gone to the ask, and can I give you a couple of
Sure.
examples? Yeah.
Yeah, of
So
course.
a couple of ladies in New York City, Diana DeFreight and Christina Pavola. Um, Now they do have a target market, a niche market, which does help. It makes it easier to get referrals even without
Sure.
asking when you have a very clear market like that. They are getting a lot of referrals without asking. They're in segment clients. They've done everything that one could do to build a culture of referrals and introductions, just short of asking. And we're working with it. And they know if they ask, they could do better. But they've educated all their clients on what they're trying to build, the community they're trying to build, how they're trying to serve people, how those people prefer to meet them through an introduction. And so they're doing everything up until the ask. And because of that, they're doing quite well and they're getting a lot of referrals. So they even have a chief experience officer now. They have someone who's really her main job is just to look for ways to create wow experiences with their clients. And that's one of the things their clients talk about when they introduce them to others. So the truth is, yes, it is possible to build a referral only business, and it's possible to build a referral only business without even asking. Now, asking will hasten it, it'll get faster, and you're going to more likely get the right people, but you can still do it. I'll give you one more example. One of my episodes, I interviewed Lester Matlock out of Little Rock, Arkansas. He's got a very cool thing that he does. And so most advisors do talk about clients' goals and dreams. It's part of the planning process. But goals, dreams, things like that sometimes feel a little amorphous, a little out there, not concrete. And so he's made it very concrete by talking about their bucket list. That's kind of the same thing, but there's something about calling it a bucket list, and you think of a list and you think of specific items. So I'll give you something that he did. It's very cool. One of his bucket list items was to attend bar. He wanted to do a bartending thing, and he had never done that before. So his wife said, why don't you do a client event and you'll be the bartender? And he said, "Oh, that's a great idea, right?" So he had a friend who had a restaurant. He attended bar a couple of nights, kind of got trained, and that made him realize why he never wants to be a bartender full time. But everyone comes to the event. He's tending bar. They know it's his bucket list item, and they bring one of their bucket list items and write it on the board when they come in. And so he collected all these bucket list items of all his clients. And then over the years, the last several years, that's been the sub theme of working with most of his clients. What is on your bucket list? How can I help you achieve that? Sometimes he just nudges, encourages, and pushes a little. He did a cruise right before COVID where he had 18 clients with him on a river cruise in Europe because that was something he always wanted to do. Turns out some of his clients wanted to do that as well. No, he didn't pay for the cruise for everybody. They paid. He just organized it. And so this whole idea of bucket list has made him very referable because their clients are not only are they seeing their investments handled properly and the right insurance in place and all that, but they're actually accomplishing these things that they probably wouldn't have done without bringing it up to Lester. So it's pretty cool. And he's got a referral only business based on helping everybody achieve their bucket lists.
Yeah, I like that, making making it concrete.
Yes.
I've seen some research recently. It's kind of partly about values and emotions and how they ought to precede the discussion of features and benefits. But one of the things the research was uncovering was that people obviously want financial security in retirement. And what financial security means to them, the researchers settled on the phrase, living a full life or living a full life in retirement. And the bucket list definitely, again, makes something like that, much more concrete. I like that.
Yeah, Brian Sweet, an advisor in Minnesota, has puts his clients through what they call the dream board. And you can imagine what that is.
The visioning thing.
You want to do it. It's kind of a bucket list, but it makes it very concrete. It's not just in the planning process. Tell me some of your goals. Tell me some of the things you'd like to accomplish. Okay, very nice, and never get visited again in the advisor relationship. Well, he brings it to life. He helps his clients bring it to life. Anytime you can help a client get clear about anything in their life, you're bringing tremendous value because the brain loves clarity. Right? If we're ever feeling unclear, then we lack action and it just, the brain doesn't like it. We feel unsettled. But whenever we get clear on something, it's like the endorphins kick in. So any way you can help clients get clear about their present, about their future, what it looks like, what it takes to actually create that, then you're doing some very powerful, real life influencing work.
Yeah, it's interesting that we were making this connection between referrals and what some also might call retirement life planning, which isn't necessarily about the investments and the asset allocation, but is more about, again, how people are going to live their life in retirement beyond, leaving the job. And people seem to really respond to a few times I've run to advisors who do it, when the advisor sees their role as talking about these things, beyond the balance sheet.
Well, and you're right. It's not just about the dollars. Now, the dollars are important. The dollars play a role in that, obviously. I was coaching a group in Australia once, I remember, and I said to them, talk to me about how you're staying in touch with your clients. What does it look like? Do you have a newsletter? Do you have meetings? And all that stuff. And pretty much everything they did was all about the performance of the portfolio. It was all about performance. And so the only thing that they were giving their clients to evaluate the relationship was the performance of the portfolio. And we know that that can be a booby prize down the road because there's a lot of things we can't control. So
Right.
we've got to give them give our clients other ways to evaluate the relationship other than that. Because everyone knows if we win people that way, we'll lose people that way. So there's got to be more to it than that. And that's what creates the referability. And think about it this way. The word remarkable means worthy of remark. So we have to create remarkable, worthy of remark experiences for clients, especially if we want to get referrals, introductions without asking for them. If we want to compel people to do that without us even, asking or even suggesting, then clearly we have to create that experience. And, this term client experience and engaged client and client service, these are all platitudes that everybody talks about. But if you don't really get into the granular tactical aspect of it, well, it's just, it's a strategy without substance.
Right. Yeah, I think, we're big at horse's mouth in terms of encouraging advisors to frame up what they're doing in the context of being a financial educator. And when you assume that role and you have the resources behind you educating your clients so that you're not just doing live events, but it's showing up in, like you said, your newsletter or other communications you're sending to them. This kind of thing really sets the advisor apart and I think makes him or her remarkable. And I think during the first phase of COVID, it was really interesting. I've tracked very closely a number of top performing advisors who are always out, putting on events, dinner seminars or workshops in a library, whatever the case may be, to build their business. And when COVID hit, a number of these top performers were not able to do that. It took a swipe at trying webinars initially, and for prospects, didn't go quite that well. And they pivoted and realized, gee, I haven't been putting on educational events for my clients. And at the outset of COVID, when the market was very choppy, of course, and there's a lot of uncertainty, these advisors realized that they needed to use this time to turn back to their clients and focus on them. And a number of them just started doing webinars every, 3 or 4 weeks to their clients all throughout the first year of COVID. And when I checked back in with them in terms of, how their events were going, because it was, very interested to know how COVID was impacting the advisor who prospects through educating, they said, wow, my referrals are better than they have ever been. They were putting on these webinars for their clients and just casually saying, hey, look, any friends, family, or colleagues that want to come in on this discussion about, the market or COVID or, IRAs and taxes, Social Security, any of these things. People were showing up who were not on their list. And these advisors ended up, having the best year for referrals than they had in quite a long time.
Yeah, when I saw when COVID first hit. Well, actually, let me give you a very specific example. So I was working with a team on Long Island, and we just started through our whole process. They'd watched the videos. We did a live session. This was in very early March 2020, right? So like March 5th, we did this live session, and then 2 weeks later, all hell breaks loose, right? And then the market crashes, and so here in this middle of trying to help them get more introductions, all this stuff hits. So for about 2 months, they essentially overserved their clients, right? They educated, they held hands, they did whatever they needed to do. We kind of put the referral thing a little bit on hold. But then what happened when we started picking it up again and they started being a little bit more proactive, they did better than they'd ever done before, because I think what COVID did for a lot of advisors, it showed them what they needed to be doing in the first place, right? They needed to be delivering a higher level of contact and education and even social events online for a while and now back to in person. But it kind of revealed what needed to be done anyway to keep clients engaged and to get introductions without asking, et cetera. So it's as bad as COVID's been for so many people and families and in all kinds of ways, there are some silver linings that came out of it for a lot of folks, and some people are having banner years, even though it's all Zoom and they're not meeting people face to face like they're so used to, but they're still having great years. So,
I mean, it's amazing. People are meeting clients virtually. I mean, meeting prospects virtually, having multiple meetings, turning them into clients, and they're only seeing each other face to face sometimes after the account is even opened.
Yep, it's true.
It's amazing. So let's talk a little bit about what referral approaches are working specifically today. Someone new is coming into the business. What are your thoughts on how are you going to direct them to think about referrals as part of their approach?
Sure. It's interesting. A lot of folks that I work with, particularly new in the business, often think that they can't work the referral/introduction process early, that they've got to get leads some other way or cold call or whatever. And that's not true. The truth is you can use the referral introduction process from day one. And the way I think about it is the way of the world is meeting people through other people. An introduction, that's the warm way we get into their lives. So whatever we need in our business, there's somebody who knows someone who can help us do that. So we need to start thinking about that right away. Now, I mentioned this briefly at the beginning of our talk here, but targeting a very clear market really can make a huge difference for anybody at any point in their career. A lot of time I get veterans calling me saying, Bill, I've been thinking about targeting the market. I have a couple ideas. Can we chat? And we do. And sometimes the market's right in front of them. Sometimes we have to work at it a little bit. But what happens when you target, first of all, let me make a distinction between a target market and a category. So a target market typically in this industry could be employees in a large company, advisors nest within a large company. So many great examples of people being successful doing that. It could be business owners in a specific industry, and could be medical practices, which is kind of similar. It could be universities. So that's a market. That's a clearly defined group of individuals that congregate in certain ways that we're trying to reach. Advisors say, well, I'm looking for people that are 5 to 7 years out from retirement. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not a market. That's a category. That's a category of people we serve. Now, when you put the two together, so I'll give you an example. Dennis O'Keefe in Boston, the south of Boston, his market is Verizon employees, and his category are Verizon employees 5 to 7 years out from retirement. He helps them navigate through into a successful retirement. And so you put those two things together, it's easier to identify who you're trying to serve, right? It's easier to serve those people. You do a better job. You know their world better. They see that you know their world better. It's not just perceived value, it's real value. And because of that, and they know people like themselves, people in similar situations, it's just so much easier to get those referrals and introductions when you do that. So I don't care whether you're new in the business or you've been in the business for 20 years, getting more focus can make a big difference. Now, do you have to? Are there generalists that do well in this industry? Well, yeah, of course there are. But those are more the legacy practices. They're not so much what people are creating these days and that are being the most successful.
Yeah, the niche thing is great opportunity for advisors. It's also excellent for your time management, because if you ever have a canceled meeting or a couple of hours opens up on your calendar that you hadn't been planning on, well, you're immediately going to turn back to your niche, because there's always stuff to be doing to catch up and advance your niche strategy. When, as you point out, it is actually a niche and not a category. And that's always been the big problem in this industry. People think, yeah, I got a niche. I specialize in retirement. It's not really.
Yeah, it's a category. And look, I'm not saying you don't specialize in that. I'm not saying you can't be successful in that way. It's just a matter of hastening your success and doing better and attracting more of the right people. So it's fine tuning. So in this industry, most people get taught how to prospect, right? They get taught how to work leads. They get taught how to cold call. Asking for referrals or introductions, I would say, is a form of prospecting, and that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. That prospecting will always be a part of what we do, but that the other side is the marketing. So from my standpoint, marketing is more of an attraction kind of situation. And so targeting a niche market, I often call that reputation marketing, because if you have kind of a scattered approach to trying to reach folks out in the world, kind of a shotgun approach to your marketing, it's hard to create a reputation for yourself. Unless maybe if you're in a small town, then sometimes you can do that. But when you have a very clear market, a target market, and yes, you can have more than one target, and you have a very clear bullseye within that target, that's where you can start to create a reputation, and people start to come to you because they've heard of you, and everything you talk about, the way you talk about it, resonates with them. The mistake so many folks make is when they're building a website or a LinkedIn profile or any kind of marketing material, they make the mistake of trying to cast a wider net when they should really start to think in terms of a more narrow net or a couple of different nets. Because when you cast a wider net, your messaging gets weaker. When you have a more narrow net, or maybe a couple of narrow nets, then every message to each net, if you will, to take this metaphor to an extreme, is going to be more relevant. It's going to be more effective because of that. So narrow is almost always better than expansive, and it's counterintuitive for a lot of people, but it really does work better. And people fear that if I just focus on these folks, well, then I'll give up all this opportunity here. And the truth is, well, yeah, you might give up some of that opportunity, but you're going to be so successful in your target market, you won't even notice, you won't even care anymore.
So a lot of these target markets can be found together online in a variety of ways.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about what you have to say relating to the rise of social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, and how you've seen that. Who have you seen who is effectively using that to get introductions?
Well, I kind of make the joke that the only people making money on LinkedIn are the people teaching you how to make money on LinkedIn. Yeah, I haven't seen much. I really haven't. I've seen LinkedIn as a distraction. I've seen LinkedIn as people confusing activity for results. And with that said, I'm not saying that we should ignore LinkedIn and by any stretch. It does have value, but prospecting through LinkedIn, purely trying to pursue and gain prospects, it's a tough road to hoe. The people that I have seen have some success. Again, it goes back to that target market, because,
Right.
for instance, employees in a large company, you get to know their benefits package. in a way probably even better than the HR department knows it, and certainly better than any generalist that might be approaching someone who works for a company. So then, therefore, the message that you might send in a message through LinkedIn, or the content you might post that someone might come across, is going to be more targeted and therefore more relevant and more compelling, and they might actually respond to it. The thing about LinkedIn is it's so weird though, right? And we all know this, is that everyone wants to get connected on LinkedIn, and we do that. But the minute someone starts to give us any kind of pitch, right, it's like, no, forget, block all, it's like,
Right.
it's crazy. So you got to have a great LinkedIn profile. I'm a big believer in that, because we know that even people that get introduced to us are still going to search us a little bit. They're going to look us up, and quite often it's that LinkedIn profile that shows up first, even before the website. And so that's got to speak to the prospect. You got to have the right words on the description of who you are and what you do that will pull them in, at least won't alienate them. And then, so there, it does have a role. I also think that publishing content on LinkedIn, even if first of all, let's understand that no more than 4, 5, 6, 7% of your contacts will ever see any content that you post. So most of the time, most of your contacts are not going to see whatever you post, right? So, what is it doing for us in that regard? Well, it creates a little bit of credibility for some, but it does get us in the mode of writing. And I believe that all advisors should think in terms of writing and crystallizing content through their glasses, through their brain, right? And experts write, experts speak. It's all part of the package. But for someone to go in there and say, I'm going to build a business just on LinkedIn, and I'm going to prospect and reach out, and I haven't seen it yet. And obviously my inclination is relationship marketing. But every study I've ever seen, I'm sure you guys have done the studies too. I saw one from Schwab a while ago, that of affluent and financial clients, 84% of the people who meet their financial advisor do so through a recommendation from someone else they already trust, a friend, a family member, a center of influence, CPA, right? And 16% through other methodologies. So you can focus on that 84% of what we know works, or you can focus on that 16% that can work by default. I tend to want to work on, I want to build a business based on how people want to meet me.
Right.
To me, that's introductions.
So what about the passive approach to encouraging referrals? What are your thoughts on that? Is that still valid?
Oh yeah, it's absolutely valid for a few reasons. It just, let's just not confuse it with actually asking. So sometimes I call it promoting referrals or introductions, planting seeds, things we can say early and throughout a relationship. I've kind of been known for a phrase. I didn't invent the phrase. It's a title of one of my books. Don't keep me a secret, right? It's a fun, cute thing you can say. Not every advisor is comfortable with it. That's fine. And never too busy to see if I can be a resource for other people you care about. Never too busy to see if I can be a resource. Those are the qualifiers, right? Not everybody's a good match for you and vice versa. So we're always in a qualifying mode. I'll tell you one of the most powerful ways to promote introductions, to stimulate the conversation without really asking, is to teach your clients, and sometimes even prospects, what it would look like if they did think of someone, how you would handle it. And the two elements of that are, first of all, confidentiality, making sure they know if they ever do think of anyone they want to introduce to you, that everything is confidential. They're not going to learn about your situation, vice versa. And then the other is, what would it look like? How would you handle it? That you're not going to just ask for a phone number and bug their friends and then make them regret they did this thing, right? So teaching people how you would handle it is a great way to introduce it into the relationship. You're not really asking. It's an easy yes for them to say, yeah, it makes sense. Sounds good. So that's one way to do it. Another way a lot of folks will promote introductions, semi-passive, if you will, is to teach people who you serve the best. Right? And I say, Sean, you might imagine, I've been in this business for quite some time. We're not the right firm for everybody, right? There are certain folks who our processes are geared towards, and certain folks where we're not the right firm for. And so I'd love to just share with you, who we're doing our best work for these days, people like yourself. So if you ever do encounter someone you think should know about us, we can talk about it, see if it makes sense, because we're not the right firm for everybody. So then you educate, right, what it looks like. And you can get into demographics like income and investable assets and things like that. You can get into psychographics, whatever it is. But educating people is another way to promote the possibility. What you want to avoid is what happened with my advisor when I had dinner with him last October, outside, COVID-safe dinner. He sat down. He says, Bill, I just heard something today from a great client that I know I shouldn't be hearing. I said, all right, Aaron, what did you hear? He says, well, I had a client, great client, by the way, say, Aaron, are you still taking on new clients? And we both agreed that that's not something that you want, especially your A clients, to be wondering about. You want to let them know that if the match is right, if it's you're the right person for them and vice versa, you're definitely willing to entertain and be introduced to those folks. So that's an important part of the process. It's not the only thing. I think of it this way: to get more introductions, to build a business based on introductions, it's not just the asking. Asking is a piece of it. It's a culture that we build. It's a culture of meeting people that way, celebrating that we meet people that way, educating people about who we serve the best, about what it would look like if they didn't introduce someone to us, having events where they bring guests, whether they're educational or fun events. But it's a culture that we build all based on introductions. And you can do that without even asking. And if you do ask, then you're going to be a little more successful, a little faster.
Right. Yeah. So what about identifying people? And every advisor, I think, has sort of top tier fan club, but maybe advisors haven't thought about that. It's like, how do you identify and cultivate people in your client list who might help with those introductions?
Sure. We'll call them advocates for your business. And most advisors have at least some that have happened naturally. And yes, there are ways to be proactive and cultivate. So I'll tell you first of all, the value of an advocate is, number one, they advocate for us. They recommend us. They say good things. They vouch for us. That's good. That's important. And they also pay attention to the connection. They'll bug us or they'll bug their friend. Have you connected yet? Right? Because they're enthusiastic about it. I've seen advisors. Rod Gibbings stands out as he's an advisor in Kelowna, British Columbia, north of Vancouver. And he has an ambassador program where he has clients who have kind of become these advocates. And so he nurtures these relationships, and he has special thank you events just for the ambassadors. So the secret sauce, if you will, to creating these advocates for your business is what I'll label the business friendship. Right? It's not like you're going out late at night drinking, telling each other deep, dark secrets, but it is a relationship that's based on a lot more than just the pure business side of things. You're talking about other aspects. They get to know you. You get to know them. You help them with their vision for what they're trying to accomplish. And guess what? They want to know what your vision is for what you're trying to accomplish in life or business. And so it's these business friendships that develop into advocates. So that's why client appreciation events and other things like that is a big part of the mix. You always want to look for ways to relate and interact with your clients outside the conference room in your office, right? Just walking them to the elevator or the car. It's amazing how different things will come up in conversation that didn't come up when you're in the conference room. So, or the Zoom room at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's so true.
Right. So it's been a little harder building the business friendships over the last 18 months, but it's still possible. And we want to look for ways to do that down the road. And that's what creates these advocates And you want to celebrate these advocates. You want to create special moments and thank yous for these folks, and let some of your clients just subtly know about this group of these advocates. Oh yeah, we took some clients. Oh, well, how do you know? Who are those people? Well, these are the people that have introduced us to others, and we celebrate that. We appreciate that. So again, that's part of the culture I'm talking about.
Right. Yeah, the business friendship thing I think is really critical. The things that you can learn and the depth of the relationship that can grow when you're just having a casual dinner out and you're talking about where you went to vacation this last summer, or where maybe you're going to be going to vacation, or what's going on with your kids or your family. These kind that are totally not about your business and the practice, or about their lives. When people are able to share those stories and exchange that kind of energy, it's really builds much deeper connections that, as you say, are providing an experience of what it's like to be part of your circle.
Right.
And then people are much more inclined to refer, I think, or make introductions. Just be, advocates, like you say.
Yeah, I mean, breaking bread. There's nothing better than breaking bread with clients. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, round the golf, all those sorts of things. It's huge. And Sean, every now and then I do run into some advisors who they've done it a little. They say it doesn't work, or they haven't really tried. They think they should do it, or they want to keep an arm's length with their clients. And yeah, you do have to have the right boundaries in these relationships, and you're missing huge opportunities. When people recommend you, and their friend says, well, why are you recommending your advisor? What do you like about your advisor? And they got to have something to talk about, right? And so you got to give them that robust relationship that makes a big difference. And it usually shouldn't be just the fact that, well, he or she's made me some money. Well, if you haven't made money over the last 18 months, then, something's wrong with that relationship anyway. But we know it's not always going to be that way. So,
yeah. So what about this issue of advisors having some sort of fear around asking for referrals?
Yeah, there's a lot of it, and it's universal. It's international. I've spoken all over the world. Malaysia, Korea, India, Singapore, Australia, U.S., Canada, Mexico, Argentina. It's the same, and people don't want to look needy or unsuccessful. People don't want to look pushy, or don't want to make the clients feel uncomfortable. A lot of advisors don't ask because they fear rejection. They don't want the client to say, no, I don't have anybody I can introduce you to. So there's all kinds of stuff. It's all mistaken thinking. It's all limiting thinking and mistaken beliefs. The key is having a way that takes care of those fears, right? I understand those fears feel real and they stop people. And we all have those sorts of things in our life. And so the key is finding a process that will alleviate all or most of those. And that's, what I've been all about for many, many years, is giving people a process that takes care of those things. Now, some people can get through those fears and some people can't. Sometimes I help folks, get up to that point of asking, and then they're still doing okay because they're doing other stuff better, but they just fall short, and they just can't bring themselves to do it. Some people believe that asking for help is a sign of weakness. And any psychologist will tell you that asking for help is actually a sign of high ego strength. And in this case, we're asking for help to help others. Let me give you an example of, I won't use his last name. His first name is Al. He's in New Jersey. I've been working with Al for a long time. When I met Al, he had 300 million of assets under management, already a pretty successful business. Definitely. And he was reluctant to ask for referrals, introductions, until he realized that he didn't have to make it the old way. He didn't have to make it about him and how he got paid and how he's trying to build his business and all of that, not, old stuff. He could make it about them and bringing the value to other people. And I found the people that get good at this, if they're not naturals to begin with, and there's some that are naturals, for everybody else, there's like a switch inside the brain that has to flip from one side to the other. And that's what happened for Al. It's like he woke up to this other way of looking at it, and he just went over $1 billion of assets in about 10 years, right? So that's pretty good. And it was all that switch flip from one side to the other. So asking, it's not rocket science, right? It's about confidence. And if you don't feel confident, what do you feel? Well, doubt, uncertainty, fear, whatever. So how do you get confident in asking? How do you get confident in anything? Well, you learn a process that works, and then you practice it. A very underutilized strategy in this business of actual practicing. Many advisors practice their golf game a lot more than they practice any other aspect of their business. And then you work it with clients, and then you get slowly confident and good and effective with it. So, can you be successful without asking? Yeah, of course you can. Can you be a little more successful, a little more directive in where you want to go with your business when you do ask in the right way? Absolutely.
Right. Well, it seems to me that if you're an advisor who's leading your clients through the financial planning process over the years, you're addressing one after another of really major issues, a good many of them that, gather around the pre-retirement and retirement years. But as you lead your clients through these experiences of addressing these issues, that it does naturally create an opportunity for the advisor to, say, look, if you know anybody else who hasn't really thought about exactly what their long-term care plan is,
Right.
right, let
And
me
that's
know.
kind of, I mean, that's getting into the asking a little bit. So, what you just demonstrated there is a little bit of kind of throwing it open to the whole universe. And I suppose it's better than nothing. If you say, is there anyone you can think of that should know about what we do, or anyone you think should address this issue or needs to be educated in this area? Yeah, it sometimes can produce a result, and that's good. I found the best way to ask is what I'll call a bullseye referral or introduction is to identify specific people in your clients' lives to whom you'd like to at least explore being introduced. And so if you have the right mindset from the minute you meet people, you ask the right questions and you pay attention to other people in their life, that at some point you build a little inventory. At some point you can go back and say, let's talk about your sister and brother-in-law. Let's talk about your Uncle Ernie. Let's talk about your children, right? Or parents, right? Yeah. So that specific type of introduction to a specific person or perhaps a couple is really the most effective way to ask for introductions. Now, they're not always going to introduce you to that person. They may say, "Oh no, my brother-in-law thinks he knows everything." You don't even want to have that conversation. Okay, well, I appreciate that. We're just brainstorming. I have a couple other ideas I'd love to run by. Who are you thinking about, right? So by coming prepared, letting them know you've come prepared, a few people they've mentioned in past meetings, then everything opens up to a very nice conversation. The worst thing that happens, and I've been doing this for almost 30 years, the worst thing that happens when you ask for possible introductions is they don't feel comfortable with that. They just don't want to go there for whatever reason. We have a whole methodology to talk to them about it, but it's not a heavy-handed. We're not trying to convince someone to do something they don't want, because we're in it for the long haul here. But the worst thing that happens is you back off nicely, professionally, gracefully, and you've planted the seed. You've promoted the possibility. They now know that you are indeed open for business. You're never too busy to see if you can be a resource for others. And I'm sure almost everybody listening to this has experienced where you asked at some point, the client didn't want to go there for whatever reason, and the next time they see you, they say, "Hey, Sean, I think I've got somebody for you." They're ready to do it on their own terms.
Okay, right.
So that's the worst thing that ever happens.
Okay, Bill, so we're close to wrapping up here. I want to give you the chance to direct any of our viewers to your sites or your programs,
Yeah,
anything that somebody would want to take you up on.
Sure. Well, let's start with things that are just of value that don't cost anything. So first of all, just to get to know me and my world a little bit, my podcast. I'm very excited about the podcast because I'm really pulling out some very cool stories, and not just stories, but examples, strategies, tactics that we mentioned a few already that people are doing. So if you go to topadvisorpodcast.com, you go to the homepage, you can subscribe, you can listen to some of the episodes. That's one thing. We also have a lot of free resources on our resources page, and that's referralcoach.com/resources, referralcoach.com/resources. A lot of free stuff there. Again, you can subscribe to our weekly tips, get into my world a little bit, see what I have to say, see if you like it. Yeah, we offer coaching. Yeah, we have online video training. We have all of that, but just get to know me a little bit first and see if you like the message. And then we can certainly chat about other ways to be of service.
Okay, Bill. Well, thanks so much. Appreciate you coming on.
Of course.
Building a better business advisory practice. Thanks everybody for listening. And again, Bill, thanks so much. Appreciate your time.
My pleasure.